I'm Jacinta Whelan, a partner at Watermark Search. I'm in the Melbourne office, and I'm hosting today on behalf of all of Watermark and our offices across Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands that we're meeting on today, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are participating in today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping things. Today's session is being recorded. We'll be sharing that at the end of the session with everyone today, and Shirley's very kindly agreed that she will share the slides. So post today you'll get the recording and the slides, and that'll allow you to sort of keep you free to listen, absorb, knowing that you can revisit the content at a later date. Also, the recording will be available on Watermark's library. We have a series of webinars, and there's a library that you can go and jump into and find this and many other great webinars. The purpose of the Watermark webinars is always to bring you highly relevant topics to your executive and board careers, and probably not a bigger topic that's going around than AI at the moment. The aim for our sessions is always to inform and educate, to provide some stimulating thought, but really importantly to leave you with some practical tips and takeaways that you could sort of take away today and action something within your own career. Let me introduce Shirley. We're absolutely delighted to welcome Shirley Chowdhary as our guest today. Shirley's a highly respected board director, governance leader and advocate for inclusive leadership. She brings deep experience across publishing, education, not-for-profit and the built environment. And she's well known for her thoughtful work at the intersection of governance, culture, ethics, and emerging issues such as AI. Shirley's on the board of Hardy Grant. She's a Senate Fellow and Pro-Chancellor at the University of Sydney, and she serves and advises on a range of boards and organisations. She's also deeply involved in strengthening board capability through her work with the AICD. Shirley's widely recognised for her clear, courageous insights into what good governance looks like in practice and how boards can balance the important link between commercial, ethical and human considerations in what is a really complex environment, as we all know. We're thrilled to have Shirley here today and share her perspective. Shirley, before we dive into the framework, I've got two key questions. I wanted to know why you wrote the article. The article we're based on, everyone would have had in the invitation, but you wrote that article in the RSCD. I saw it and saw your name, and for those listening, I literally called that day and said, right, we are doing a discussion on that. This is fabulous. So why you wrote the article, and why is AI governance critical a board issue now? You know, it's been around a while. Why are we sort of all of a sudden only talking about it? So those two, and then we might launch into the framework.
Thank you, Jacinta. It's so nice to be here. And I'd just like to say I'm on Gadigal land today, and I pay my respect to elders past and present, and thank them for their ongoing custodianship of this land. So why I wrote the framework? So you're right, AI's been around since the 50s, so it's nothing new. I think since the public version of ChatGPT was first released a number of years ago, I think it's become more critical for boards because now we're talking about generative AI and organizations are racing to embed it. Why I wrote the framework, I just saw this dearth of discussion. Nobody was discussing it. We were discussing how to oversee enterprise AI in our organizations. But we weren't talking about using it in the boardroom to make our own decisions and judgment better. And that really concerned me. And I had the time at the time, I just stepped off a few boards and so dove into it and I'm really structured. And so I needed, we had people talking about workforce implications and environmental implications and how to combat shadow AI and how to deal with minutes and all of these disparate pieces. And in my own head, I needed a structure. And so that's how I landed on that structure, and it's morphed. And I should mention that article for the AICD, because of printing deadlines, I wrote that in November last year.
Right.
And so since then, it's morphed a little bit, and it's now that article, you're always also constrained by the word count. And so now the framework has developed into, a 10,000 word framework. And so today I'm not going, I'll reference the article, but it's changed a little bit and hopefully
Mm,
gotten better. So I want to share that morphed version with
yes.
everybody because I think, like all things AI, our thinking constantly evolves on this.
And when we spoke, Shirley, you mentioned that sort of the intent was to create discussion. So by no means sort of suggesting this is the only way or
No.
the preeminent way, but it feels like it's generated a lot of discussion. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm never the smartest person in the room. I have
Mm,
no doubt that this will, what I'd love is for people to reach out and say, actually, that doesn't make sense. I
mm,
think this makes better sense. Or have you thought about this? Or it's great. And what about this? Like, I
mm,
think that's the benefit of a board. We live and die as a collective, and
yeah.
you enter a boardroom and your ideas are always made better by the contribution of other
Mm,
people around the table. And some of those contributions often you haven't thought about. And so
yeah.
that's the purpose of sharing it, is to really get people thinking about it, to get them to contribute, to make it better, to develop a framework that we can all use that is really useful.
Very generous of you to sort of, just set the ball rolling, as it were, and then people can improve on it from there.
Oh, I'm learning. So that's what I get
Yeah.
out of it. I think they, they're entirely selfish.
So that was sort of the why. Why now? You mentioned AI has been around since the 50s. Why are we all of a sudden, every single conversation we have involves AI and the governance of AI?
I think organizations are racing to embed AI. There's
Mm,
this general consensus that if you're not on the AI bus, you're going to miss the journey.
mm,
And I think there's some truth in that. I think boards, I still talk to directors who are struggling to get their head around it. I had a
mm,
discussion with the director at the end of last year, and she said to me, "Oh, it's a bit theoretical. I'm not sure we need to jump on this one just yet." I disagree really strongly.
mm,
I think it's no secret that I've said, as we get older, as I get older, we need to stay on top of the technology. Those technologies are entering our organizations. If they're entering our organizations as a board member, we need to stay on top of them. I'm
mm,
not a technologist. I don't want anybody on this call to go away thinking I'm selling myself as an AI expert. I am absolutely not. What
mm,
I am is a board director who has spent time trying to grapple with this new technology that is entering my organizations and trying to understand how I can use it better, how my boards can use it better, and how my organizations can use it in a way that is safe, well governed, and all the things we'll talk about today. Like, I think that's really important. And so, why today? Because I think there's an urgent need for
mm.
boards to get across this and to understand that this is a tool that they can use to make their jobs, to make the way they do their jobs better.
Fabulous. Let's jump in. I love that in the framework is essentially two elements to this. It's
Yep.
the governing of AI,
Yep.
and governing with AI, because often those, again, there's so much talk, as you said. There was, well, is minutes what we need to talk about, or is it what it's doing to our business we need to talk about? So I'll let you start, but I really liked how you'd broken it into the sort of two parts there.
Yeah, thank you. I think so. Governing AI is the piece that I think people have been talking about. How to manage all the issues we see in our organizations, which we'll spend more time on. The piece that we're missing, I don't think we're talking enough about, is how to govern with AI, how to use it to make to make us better as directors, to allow us, we operate now in Australia in one of the most complex regulatory environments in the world.
Mm,
Joe Longo has said that repeatedly. And so, with all these inputs coming towards us, AI is one of the tools we can use to make sense of the world, to understand our organization's position in that world, in that macro environment in a better way. And so, I think that second piece is the piece that
mm,
I love talking about. I'm not
mhm,
the AI specialist, but the governing with AI, I think there is so much scope. And together with, so Dr. Vince Murdoch is a board advisor who I've been working with as well. And we've built up that whole governing with AI piece on all
mm,
the different things and imagining what a boardroom could look like in 5 years' time with
mhm.
AI embedded in there.
Love it. Let's go.
Okay.
We were going to also, everyone, just take a pulse of the room. And we've got a question here. Ali, if you might be able to put that up for us and get you involved. Here's the questions there. But how would you describe your board's current approach to AI? Four questions there. And we'll just give you a minute to do that. We've got three questions across today that we'll talk about just to really get a sense of where those who are on the call are at and help us with some of the discussion.
Yeah, it'll just help us frame it, I think, to understand where people are coming from.
Yeah. You probably need to put an answer in as well, Shirley, for it to.
Oh, really? It says hosts and
Oh,
panelists
that we're
can't
not
vote.
allowed. Oh, there we
No,
go.
no.
Otherwise, we
So
might skew the data.
I'll skew the data. The Jacinta, the only other thing I'd say while we're waiting for people to fill
Yeah.
out the poll is I would welcome people to reach out on LinkedIn, reach out with your ideas, tell me what you're up to on your boards. I think like all of that joint thinking, collaborative thinking will make this better. I'm also really up for being told that this is rubbish and that people have a better way. Like I think that, all of that is really important.
As I said, very generous to share that. Here come the results. Thanks, Ali. And we'll share that 44% of people said we're discussing it, but have not formalised anything. 28%, so a third, roughly a third said it comes up occasionally, but not structured. 20%, so a fifth of people said we have a framework and we apply it,
Mm.
and 8% of people said it's not on our agenda.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah. What we'll
So
do with this
interesting.
post, this Shirley, is we might take some of that and discuss it in um, an article or something that you and I,
Yeah,
or a blog
perfect.
or something that we can do. Yeah,
Yeah,
fabulous.
perfect, perfect. Jack, before we jump into the framework itself, I
Mm,
want to make a point that um, our directors' duties aren't changing. Right? Our directors' duties are what they are. We have a best interest duty to act in the best interest of the organisation. We have to act with care and diligence. Um, all of that remains unchanged.
mm,
What and the governance principles on which this framework rely are also the same governance principles that we've been operating with. Nothing changes there. We need things to be visible. We need to understand who's accountable. We need to understand how decisions are being made. We need to comply with our external duties. And so that's just the foundation on which this framework sits. And I guess the challenge or the question I would put out there before we jump into the framework is in what period of time will it be true that if you're not using AI as an input in your boardroom, you won't be meeting your duties of care and diligence because you're not using the information available to you? And that's just a provocation that I put out there.
yeah.
Okay.
This is another question, just to build up where we're at. How is AI currently being used in your boardroom? Four answers there. Ask you to jump in.
And I guess the responses here draw a distinction
Mm,
between using it myself in my
mm,
own preparation and actually using it in the boardroom. And then in the boardroom, you're using it administratively or you're using it a bit more broadly.
yeah. We had a whole lot of other questions we wanted to ask everyone, but we've kept it to three. One was, how do you personally use it? How does your board use it? But in the interest of time and getting through the framework, we've kept it to three.
And after this question, we'll dive right back into the framework.
We might have a look at that, Ali, if we can, some of those answers. So
And
how is it being used in the boardroom we're looking at? 52% of people say they use it for themselves.
mm,
Shirley's that
mm,
distinction you've said.
yeah.
45% are using it for minutes and administrative.
Mm,
7% of people are using it deliberately in closed, secure platforms. 20% it's not being used at all, so a fifth of
yeah.
organisations, and 2%, a very small percentage of people, are using it extensively.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And Jack, just picking up on one of the comments in the chat, somebody
Mm,
has said that we didn't ask whether people were using it throughout the organizations. I guess where I'd really like to, we'll go through all the framework, but what I'm
mm,
really focusing on today as a director is directors' use of it. And so that's why that answer
yeah.
wasn't in the responses. Should we dive
Let's
in?
let's do it.
Oops. Sorry, it's there might be some user error with the slides today as I get used to this.
We need an AI to do it for us.
Oh, I tell you. So, do you want me to just describe
Yeah,
the
yeah,
framework?
go. Yeah,
So, I've
yeah.
moved around. People who are familiar with the article will notice that I've moved around some of the domains. I've done that just for ease of talking about these two categories of governing AI and governing with AI. So, as I said, governing AI is governing AI across the organization or enterprise, and I've split it up into three parts. The first is oversight of how you're using it. The second are all the environmental and social governance issues that arise out of using it. And the third is your organizational resilience and your risk framework as a result of embedding it. And then pillar 4 and 5 are governing with AI. The fourth one is about enhancing our own judgment quality, our own decision making, our own quality of as directors and as a board in the boardroom. And domain 5 is all about foresighting. It's about strategy, scenario planning, predicting the future, using AI as a tool to get better at that element of a board's work. Are you happy just for me to flick through
Yeah, keep going.
that?
Yeah, it's all yours. Yep.
Okay, so we had another poll here, but maybe we'll leave the poll and come back to it
Okay. Yep, no
later
problem.
on.
Yep.
So let's go to this one. So the first pillar is enterprise AI, and I dare say that most of the people on this call will be most familiar with this area. So there's a piece about, before you even deploy AI through your organization, what's your board approval process? Does the board understand how it's being embedded? Are you seeing everywhere it's being embedded in the organization? Um, and ensuring then that the data quality that the organization is relying on in those AI models is clean. We all have a problem with data quality.
Mhm.
It often has to be cleansed before it gets thrown into these AI models.
Yeah.
You've got to think about the bias that might sit in that data and the conclusions that AI might draw out of that data. You need an assurance process. 3 lines of defense is what we're
Yep.
used to, and I think that fits in really well with AI assurance. Um, and then the two areas I wanted to really dive into here were the use of shadow AI and agentic AI. Um, because we're not going to have enough time in an hour to
Yep.
spend
Yes. Yep.
detailed time
And
on
that
this.
was already in the questions. So fabulous. Let's start
Yeah,
here.
so shadow AI is, everybody will be familiar with the term. It's about using non-governed or non-approved AI models in your work. So, and I imagine some of the directors might be doing this in their preparation. So organizations will put in a governance framework for AI and put in some tools. So you might have access to Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude. You might have access to more than one in your organization. But shadow AI is about the illicit use of AI. So I'm working in the organization and I don't really want my manager to know that I'm using AI in my role. So what I might do, I might take a photo with my phone of my screen, plug it into my non-sanctioned AI on my phone or my iPad, ask it some questions, get a great result, then type it back in as if I did it myself. So we've got the risk of organizational data going into a model that's not protected. Um, and that's a big risk for boards. Board directors, I can't say strongly enough, we shouldn't be taking board papers or any confidential information and putting them into our own subscriber
Mm.
models of AI because we don't have the protections. And yes, we select a tab that says our data won't go to train the main model,
Mm.
but ultimately, if you read the T's and C's, you've got very little assurance that won't
Mm.
happen. I am even, every now and then, I will go through and I will delete my chats because I
Good.
don't want them kept in there. I'm a bit of a cynic. I'm
Yep.
very careful. So I think we need to be careful of that. And shadow AI also creates another question, and that is if people are going to their own tools to use AI rather than using the sanction tools in your
Mm.
system, What does that say about the cultural safety and psychosocial safety in your organization about admitting that they use AI? Like, I'm very open. I use AI in everything I do. In detailed emails, in writing, in thinking as a sparring partner, and we need to create environments in our organizations where people can be open about that. I'm conscious that I'm talking, Jack. Did you want
No,
to?
no, you are. It's your knowledge, Shirley. I'm just listening like everyone else.
Uh,
Agentic AI. We've had a few questions about agentic AI, so they'll be keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So agentic AI is autonomous AI. It's AI where you put in a series of instructions, feed the data in, and again, this is AI for dummies because I'm not a technologist. And then it runs autonomously. And then you can create models where agentic AI, different agents talk to each other, and you have a chain, if you like, of things happening with the
Yes.
agents, and often no human in the loop.
Mm.
The real risk there is, well, there's a few different things here, but we need to be able to explain our decisions. When regulators come knocking on our doors to understand how we're doing things, it won't be sufficient to say, well, we handed it over to the agents. And
Yes.
so I think the board piece there is about understanding what the constraints are around those agents, where they're going to for information, what they can and can't do. And I think the truth is, none of us really understand the power of agentic AI. We're learning, but asking the questions is really important. Questions are the biggest tool in our arsenal as
Yep.
directors, and
Yep.
that's really important. And just to illustrate how important that is and how easy it is to get wrong, I was in a roundtable last week and somebody was telling us about a software engineer who created an AI agent on their own computer in their own system
Yep.
to do a bunch of things, read emails, answer emails, collect research, and found this agent had not been constrained properly. And this is a software engineer and was
Yeah.
taking passwords from the password manager and going out and depositing them on the internet. And so if a software engineer can get it wrong,
Mm.
we all need to be incredibly careful.
Love it. This is pillar one. We've got to keep ourselves moving, Shirley.
Okay, all right, let's keep going then. So pillar two is environmental and social governance. So this is about environmental risks arising out of the use of AI in your organization and social risks. And I guess the social piece to me is a piece where we're having a lot of conversations. It's probably the most workforce displacement, what it's doing to how we're training people, how we're teaching people to work with AI. That's the piece we spend a lot of time on. So I think there's three questions I wanted to raise here. In terms of workforce displacement, I think organizations are racing to make processes more efficient, and for consultants, and I apologize to consultants who might be listening, but I've been in conversations where they say, we'll come into your organization and we'll map every process that you run and we'll pick the processes with you that could be made more efficient with AI. It's great work for consultants, years and years of process mapping. Um, but as you make roles more efficient, what does that mean for the people in your organization? So let's say my role, 20% of my role gets taken over by AI. I don't need to do the boring, the process-driven work.
Yep.
Does that mean my job gets harder? What happens to the rest of my job? Like for example, I love the process-driven stuff. I do it all myself. I don't have an EA because it's my downtime. I get to think about everything else while I do this manual work.
Yep.
When we make people's jobs harder, we're increasing their cognitive load. Are we thinking about that? So that's the first question. Um, the second question is about workforce displacement, and that is if we're creating efficiencies in the organization, we've already seen companies um, who are cutting staff. They're retrenching people because they've embedded AI. Um, there's two choices you can make as an organization, as a board. Yes, you can retrench people, cut your costs, reduce your workforce size, increase your shareholder value by doing that. But the second option, which I'd love to see more more discussion about is if we're creating capacity in our people, how can we use that capacity in a way that we haven't been able to before to allow us to do the things we haven't been able to before? And the CEO of UN, I think it was UN Children, apologies, I think I'm not sure, UN Children or UN Refugees said that that's what they're doing. They have guaranteed that they're not going to lose jobs as a result of AI, but instead, as a not-for-profit, they've got all this stuff they never get to do. And so now they're going to try and get to that stuff rather than reducing workforce. And so I think that's an interesting option.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing here is retraining and upskilling. So the research shows that we're training and upskilling the people in the upper parts of the organizations, boards, management teams, C-suites, people up the top, which means that generally in Australia, sadly, if you look at that cohort, we're still talking mainly men, we're still talking mainly white, we're still talking less diversity. So we're now training people in a way that we're going to leave people behind. And that really, with my history, that really worries me. And blue collar workers and women are going to be the ones who really feel the pinch of that. So have a real think about who you're training in your organizations. And then the last one that I wanted to draw out of the social piece was hybrid teams. So if you're managing agentic AI now in your team, what does that mean for you? Are you being trained to do it? Who's accountable when it goes wrong? Those questions need to be answered. On the environmental side, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we know that using AI in our organizations uses more compute power, more energy, more water. Ask questions. Are your data centers cooled with recycled water? Are they cooled in another way that doesn't use town water? At the moment, Sydney Water released some figures, and a huge amount of town water is going to cool these data centers, which will become an issue. And then also don't forget that if your energy use is increasing, maybe your carbon emissions are increasing, and maybe you need to draw that into your mandatory climate reporting or whatever other reporting you might be subject to. And again, apologies, I'm racing through this. Domain 3 is resilience and risk. So now we're embedding AI at pace in our organizations. We might have concentration risk with the AI model we're using. The inference that we are drawing on might be stored offshore. We've had a world leader who's already said that they may consider turning off the tap on AI. If that happens, what does the resiliency in your organization look like? Has your business continuity plan, your crisis management plan, have they thought about that?
Yes.
And the geopolitical risk that all of that brings. And we live in the most tenuous geopolitical time, I think. Things are changing so quickly in an unexpected way. And so I think we just need to turn our minds to it. The framework is really here to say to boards, these are the questions you need to be asking.
Yes.
Right.
I'm picturing in my mind, and each of those has like literally 100 questions under each of the pillars that you could.
Yeah, absolutely. And look,
And
I've created a
yeah,
diagnostic for my own benefit
yeah,
under each of these.
yeah,
But I think for boards starting on this journey, as you see AI being embedded in your organization, it's your responsibility to ask these questions. And the question may be, look, it's really small. We're only doing this, but and so the environmental question's not relevant yet, but just being aware and asking the question. And then coming to domain 4 and 5 now. And so this is the governing, what we've talked about is governing AI. Now we're going to
yes,
talk about governing with AI. The biggest challenge that people always bring up in relation to the use of AI in boardrooms is confidential data. What happens if there's a case and it's discoverable? We don't want our data training the model. Couldn't agree more, agree with all of those things. I think all of those challenges can be addressed though. And at the AICD Governance Summit this year, Naomi Edwards, in her introduction, the chair of AICD said, yes, there are problems. They can be fixed. Just fix them and move on. And I thought that was a really excellent provocation to all of us. They can be fixed. You just need a closed system Don't use the public systems. You need a closed system. And, if you're taking, and I'm an ex-lawyer, if you're taking notes in board meetings, those notes are discoverable.
Mm.
So having
Mm.
AI in the boardroom, I'm not sure if you're doing your job well, it could help you. If you're doing your job badly, and you're not acting with care and diligence, then no, it's not going to help you.
Mm.
But neither are your notes. Um, and so you need some preconditions. And then I think challenging people to use AI in the boardroom as a thinking partner, as a sparring partner. Make sure you have a framework in the boardroom. Make sure you've got open conversation about how you're using it. But then using it in ways like minutes. Everyone who knows me knows I think minutes are the worst use of AI in the boardroom because you still need a human in the loop. But
Yes.
we've used it to evaluate directors, to detect bias, to provide summaries of conversations and tell us where the gaps are and do a gap analysis, to help the chair afterwards do an audit, reverse audit of the board meeting to try and work out what you could do better. There
Mm.
are definitely ways that you can get AI to help you in the boardroom and to elevate our judgment. And then the last one is using it in strategy. And this is about strategic planning, scenario planning, using it to get the inputs and look at how you can determine what your organization might look like after a decision is made. And just to give you an example, when I joined the Sydney University Board in December, I had information coming at me from
Mm.
everywhere. I did it only with publicly available information. I created a scenario plan with 43 variables and 4 scenarios out to 2050. It took me 24 hours. I did it with another board a few weekends ago and it took me 2 hours and it gave me quality
Because
that
your
was
prompts were
way
better?
more. My prompts were better. The platforms are stronger,
Yeah.
way stronger. The
Mm.
deep research was faster. Now
Mhm.
Claude can create artifacts that look like websites. The output was better. All of those reasons.
Mm.
And so that's the framework. Like we've raced through it, but that's the framework.
Ooh, so many questions. The chat's going off.
I can see. I haven't been there. Usually I can keep up with the chat, but I've just given up.
Um, tell me a couple of questions that I've sort of started, and then we'll look around in the chat and see if there's a couple. But what's the most, you said, I wanted to pick up that point, taking minutes is the worst scenario. There's a lot of people on this call who we need to get people to almost the starting blocks
Yes.
for
And
this,
and
right?
that is the starting block, right? But
Yeah.
in some ways, if AI is taking minutes, so on the University of Sydney board, the governance team has developed a minutes agent. Quite
Mm.
clever, right? Really
Yeah.
clever. But it works with two outputs. You can get it to create minutes for you, and then
Yeah.
you have to check it. Or you can draft the minutes and then put them in and
Mhm.
do a gap analysis. Everyone I know in the governance team is using it for the latter. So I
Right.
think it's really about, I shouldn't be so disparaging on the use of AI in minutes.
Yeah.
It's really about um, making sure you've got the checks and the balances. For smaller boards, it could be a godsend.
Mhm.
But you need to make sure that the tone, that the deliberations, that the reasons for your resolutions and the decision making are captured properly. And if you've got a really good process, so COSEC goes through them, then it's given to the chair and the CEO, and they go through them before it's distributed to the board, and the board are actively engaging in minutes,
Yeah.
um, then I think your risks are lessened because you've got great governance process. I would be very, very reluctant to ever suggest that you take minutes created by AI
Mhm.
and sign them and approve them because they will be wrong.
Yeah. What would a good AI reporting or board pack look like?
If you had all the preconditions in that we talked about, I
Yeah.
think the best board pack that I can imagine at this stage would be a platform for management to use to create the board pack.
Mhm.
with bios and understandings of all the expertises you have on the board and the questions they usually ask, so that the board pack is um, identifying the areas that the board are going to focus on. So you're improving the quality of board packs to begin with.
Yeah.
Then a platform for directors to interrogate those packs, grounded in historical data of the board. So, 10 years of board packs, financial strategy documents, annual reports, all of that, risk matrices, all of that sort of thing. So the boards can interrogate those papers. So often when a
Mm.
director reads a set of papers, you might think, oh, that topic came up, but I can't remember where. Now you have a platform to interrogate it. You can ask
Mm.
questions of the platform. Um, I'm not sure that any board pack, there's a whole bunch of platforms out there where we get
Mm.
board packs. I'm not sure they've nailed this yet, but at least they provide a closed platform. Um, but being able to interrogate the pack before you come into the boardroom will mean that you come in at at a level of engagement that is better.
Mm.
And then using it in those ways that I talked about in the boardroom, and then using it after the boardroom. So the chair's using it to make the board better. You're auditing your decisions. So you're taking your inputs and your outputs and finding out how you could do things better the next time. You're assessing yourself against competitors. You're able to, if you've got an idea or there's a strategy that's come to you from management, they can test it with the AI before putting it out. All of those things. Like, I
Mm.
think it's we're only limited by our imagination.
Yeah. Um, Shirley, the audience today is people who are executives and boards. So some are full boards, some are still in their executive roles and have boards on the side. So they're all in a position to influence and to take knowledge back to a board. What could we leave people with, sort of one or two actionable items that they might be able to do to, I'm using the words get it to the start line or move it from there, or share or inform? What's something we could leave people with?
The first thing I would say is education.
Mm.
Educate your board. So Michael Hartman, an academic in Canada, has done some research and he found that you need three people on a board, three directors, to be conversational in AI, to be able to talk about AI, to understand AI, to be using AI, to be able to move the board towards towards more action. So if you don't have that critical mass of three
Mm.
on your board who you can talk to who understand AI, then start with education. Start with education yourself. If you're not using it, go and use it. Buy two subscriptions. The free models don't cut it. So buy the subscription, start using it, and use it in everything you do,
Mm.
from travel itineraries when you go overseas to
Menus at home to whatever.
menus,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
all of that, right?
Mm.
Adapting recipes, use it for everything
Mm.
and start to get comfortable with how you prompt it. Then move to board education. If you're at that stage and your board's talking about it, develop a framework. Make sure there's two parts to that, a framework for your organization to use it and guardrails in how it's going to operate, and then a
Yep.
framework for how it's going to be used in the boardroom. And how open are you going to be about the use of AI? My wish is that we're all really open about it. Because if you're all really open about it, that gives everybody permission to bring their new thinking and new ideas into the boardroom, and then create, pull some ideas together on how you think your board could use it. Get your IT team to create that closed system. If you don't have an IT team, talk to your organization about how you can create the safest environment for the board to use AI, and then start small and just try things out. Like, I think that's how we're going to move the dial on this conversation, is try things out in the boardroom. I imagine most organizations' management is going to have their head across using AI in the enterprise, but make
Yep.
sure you're asking those questions, in particular the ones that we've raised today, but questions on the governance framework, how decisions are being made, how clean is the data, how are you managing for bias, hallucination, incorrect outputs, and just make sure wherever you're using it, nobody in the organization is thinking AI is a source of truth, because it's not. It pattern recognizes And if it doesn't have a pattern, it'll make them up. And so make sure you're asking those questions.
Two themes that have come through in the questions is should AI be sort of a subcommittee committee advisory? Are you seeing them being set up, or is AI the responsibility of the board? You started by sort of saying, at what point will the board not be doing its duty if it isn't looking at
Yeah.
the risks that are coming through with AI?
I haven't seen an AI subcommittee yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see everything, so maybe they exist. I hope they exist. At the moment, I'd expect it sits in the Audit and Risk Committee.
Yep.
But I think you remember 10 years ago when we started talking about cyber as boards,
Mm.
and the view was we needed a cyber expert on the board.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And now we've shifted. Now everybody needs to be a cyber expert. If you're building, a platform where you've got some extreme vulnerability, you might have a cyber person on there. But we need to lift everybody on the board. And so my view is until you've got a framework, until you know how you're governing it, where you're governing it, what the gaps are, it needs to be everybody's responsibility at this stage. And then moving into an AI subcommittee or the audit and risk subcommittee would make perfect sense. But having somebody to lead those discussions is really important.
I love that three-person critical. And let me ask about board member evaluation. So, one, are we
Mm,
using AI to select board members? But some of the conversations we get from executives is that there's a general sense that the executive are using AI in their day-to-day because they're sort of
mm,
knee deep in the business,
mm.
and the board's a little slower to, the members, because maybe they're slightly hands off or whatever the reason might
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
Um, have you sort of got a sense of, are we quantifying the right people are on boards with this knowledge?
Oh, that's such a long
I know,
conversation, isn't
right?
it?
Oh,
You
bomb.
know, one thing I've discovered about myself is so the technology came out. I dived straight in. I was curious. I was keen to learn. I've been adapting what I do constantly as a result. I think um, historically on boards, we've looked for lawyers, for accountants, for
Mhm.
an HR person, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
We've kind of bucketed people. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could look for people on our boards who are curious, who want to learn, who are adaptable? Because I think now that AI is here to stay, and the worst form of AI we have is the form we have today, that's what we're going to need. And the soft skills that we refer to, the
Mm.
critical judgment, the analysis, the ability to ask questions, those are going to become so important. And so, I would love boards to change how we look. Yes, we still need certain skill sets, but we should be looking for people who are adaptable and flexible and learning and keen to get their hands on the tools. And maybe that means we need more younger people on boards. Maybe it
Mm.
means,
Yeah.
but interestingly, the two people who are in my circle who are the most who use AI the most, who I use as sparring
Yeah.
partners, who one of them who I'm writing with
Mm.
on AI,
Yeah.
they're both in their late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not an
It's a
age thing.
mindset. Yeah,
It's
and
a
I agree.
mindset
Yeah.
thing, and that I find that so interesting.
Yeah. Um, have you got any sort of anything to share with Australia versus the rest of the world? Are we advanced? Are we lagging? Are we all in this sort of at the same pace? Have you got anything? I know you're on a panel over in Canada in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks, so just interested if you've got any international insights.
Yeah, look, it's fascinating. So last year there was an OECD graph that was released. It's on my LinkedIn, and it showed Australia at the bottom of the excitement levels
Mm.
on AI in the OECD, but we were near the top on nervousness
Right.
and risk aversion. We're also a country where big tech firms come to test out their technology. We're fast adopters. We race to pick up new tech. We're not fast on the AI though, which is interesting. Now,
Mm.
the other interesting piece is that in the UK, so we don't have regulation yet. We've got government best
Yep.
practice, but we
Yep.
don't have regulation. In the UK, they've got quite tight AI regulation, compliance regulation. And from the conversations I've had there in the UK, that's hamstrung them a little bit. And so people are so tied up in compliance that innovation has taken a back seat. And so I think we've got some real benefits in Australia. We're a strong player in the region. We've got lots of land for data centres. We're a strong and stable liberal democracy. We have a real opportunity to lead here. But we've got an energy issue. The energy transition's not fast here, so we've got to fix the energy transition. If we can do that effectively, and if we can get organisations to think about this broadly, I think there's a real opportunity here. I think we could do amazing things. We could really lead the region in our adoption of AI. But, there's still nervousness, there's still reluctance. And that's from government right through, I think.
There's a question's been raised that says plenty of boards are fearful or complacent, or maybe there's a lower appetite for adoption. If you're a director who faces pushback from a collective of director decision making, how do you best protect yourself if the organisation you face resistance at the board level to exploring the governance of AI? Any tips on that?
Yeah, keep pushing, get it minuted. Keep having the conversations. And education, I have found in my experience, is often the thing that changes. Like even on previous boards where I've had directors not understand conflicts of interest. Governance is the thing that changes it. If you keep coming back to education of corporate governance, you'll eventually we will all eventually get there.
Yeah.
Right? It almost feels like a Kodak moment to me. The ones who won't get there will be left behind. And so I think there's a real existential moment here. And the question that I would ask people to take to their boardrooms is the one that for me falls into this slide on that we're on domain 5. And that's the question, if a competitor started up next to us today, selling the widget we're making or providing the service we're giving, and they were AI enabled, how would they do it? And what does that gap analysis look like with our business? And what can we learn from that gap analysis to improve ourselves so that we don't get left behind? And I think that strategic question should drive our adoption of AI. Putting AI in for the sake of AI
Yeah.
is not really a benefit. Putting it in to adapt your business model, to make sure you stay current, to give customers the best experience they can give, to make your widget the best one in the market, to do all of those things. That's why we employ AI as a tool.
Another question, and then we sort of might be near the end of the questions and we'll wrap up. But as a NED, is there anything materially missing in AI user cases that we're seeing at the board?
AI user cases. What do they mean by
User
AI?
cases. So, yeah, that was a question. I've read it out, but I haven't sort of got there thinking
Maybe the
behind.
person who asked that question could quickly just type in at the very end what they mean by user cases. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about AI use in the boardroom, and I think there are lots of gaps because people are using it in their minutes and not really stepping into the other spaces. No, I haven't got it yet. Use cases for major adoption of AI for specific purposes.
Yeah.
Are we seeing gaps in use cases for major adoption of AI for specific purposes? Look, I don't know there's an easy answer to that. I think the truth is that there's lots of gaps everywhere in how we're using it. I think we've got the most uptake in enterprise AI. Companies using it. Management has been much better, right? I think and maybe it comes from management being younger, management being, their KPIs depend on it. So there might be a whole host of things driving that. But I think what we're really good at so far, better at, is efficiencies in our processes. I think there's a gap between using AI to make your processes more efficient and using it for strategic purposes.
Yeah.
And so I'd say there's a huge gap there.
And where in the boardroom has AI really added value? Have you seen anywhere that it was like a game changer?
I think we're getting there. I haven't seen any
Mm,
examples where, so on the University of Sydney is probably the most advanced of my boards at this
yeah.
stage, and
Mm,
they've run a bunch of pilots and really hungry. You know, I've got a chancellor there, David Thodey, who's super keen on
yeah.
technology. So, and staying current. So, we've tested a bunch of things there. Um, but yeah, I don't think that boardroom of 2030 that I'm imagining with
Yeah.
Dr. Vince Murdoch, it's not here yet.
So you're writing an article and you're doing some further work on the boardroom of
Yeah.
2030. You don't have to give us your IP yet, but where's that going? What are you thinking?
So what I'd like to do, and this is again with Dr. Vince Murdoch, what we're doing is trying to help directors and chairs understand the questions and the things they should be focused on in governing AI. And
Mm,
then how, like, what are the real life examples that they can actually take and use with prompts, with director assessments, with education, on using AI in the boardroom? And so that's what we're
mm.
trying to do. And look, we're trying to work out what it is, whether it's a blog or a book, or we don't know. We've written a lot. I think we've written about 100,000 words so far, and just trying to work out what that looks like.
What would you say? We see a lot of people, the time it takes to stay up to date with AI, it's moving at such pace. How do you stay up to date? And it's really important to leave everyone today with hope
Yeah,
around this. There's a fear around AI for all the
yeah,
reasons that we know. It's, they will find a way. How do we
yeah,
leave people with that? Where you're at's an okay place to start,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
and how then, if we've still got a way to go and we all have to constantly stay learning this, what are a couple of ways that you stay on top of this,
Mm,
or maybe that you talk about the board of how we keep refreshing our knowledge of this?
yeah. Look, I think, in some ways, I think it's never been a better time to be a
Mm,
director on a board. Like, how fun that everything we do is being challenged and we can do it better and become better directors. So I think from that perspective, it's super exciting. And I would suggest that everybody approach it like that, like leave the fear behind. We can all there between the lawyers and the compliance people and the risk people, there will be ways to manage the fear. Step into it. And I look, what I do, I listen to, there's a number of podcasts, there's
yep.
um, articles. I get a constant feed in my inbox. I don't read everything, but I scan everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
maybe what we can do, Jacinta, is in the post that we do after this
Mm,
webinar, we can share some of those resources. I'd be really happy to share some of those resources. Um, and when I read something, I'm often putting it on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great place because it allows you to be part of conversations that you wouldn't
yeah.
have in IRL, as my 20-year-old would say, in real life. And so, yeah, I would just talk to people, use
Yeah.
it, go to all the professional development stuff. Like, that's where you learn and talk to people and get to hear what they're doing. And I think director communities learn from each other, and that's
And
a
the
really
yeah.
helpful thing.
And the AICD were clearly interested in an article, and you're very involved there. So that's probably as good a place as any to
Yeah.
start, and stay up to date with all things that are moving at such pace in this AI world.
Absolutely. And the AICD resource, again, well, it's in my last week's post, but AICD wrote a resource on AI in boardrooms, AI for
Mm,
boards, and it's
yep,
really great. I collaborated on it, the number of great people who collaborated on it. It's a great place to start.
yeah. We have got lots. What we're going to do from here, everyone, there's some really good questions, too much to sort of, delve into, but we are going to pick it up. We're going to do some further work on this. Shirley, you've so generously given people a starting place. When we were planning this session, you've kindly agreed to share this so people can take it and do with it what they will. But also, as you said to begin with, reach out, let's improve it. Let's
Yeah,
not suggest that this
absolutely.
is
No,
right. There was a couple of bits, you forgot this, you hadn't thought of this, and
yeah,
that's the point, to take it from
yeah.
here and make it your own.
Absolutely. And the only thing I would say is, an hour's never enough. So
No,
we've
that's
really sat on the top of this. There's 10,000 words below
right.
this.
Yes,
So, yeah, use this, take it, talk to me, reach out on LinkedIn, all of that.
good. We
And thank you for initiating the conversation, Jacinta.
oh,
We need more of these conversations to get people to feel comfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Shirley, your insights, your generosity to share and get this conversation is so welcome. Thank you for everyone on the call for being part of this. Just by turning up shows that we can move the dial. Um, and being part of our webinar series more broadly, what we look to do is bring you the topics we keep hearing about when we're out in the market. And this conversation feels like, if I have 4 or 5 client meetings a day, this is the conversation that comes
Yeah.
up at most of them. So
Yeah.
how are we, today's was about the governance side. There'll be further conversations about it more at different, functional and executive levels as well. Remember, there's the library of past webinars that you can jump into, but really wish everyone a fabulous day. Thank you for joining us, for giving us an hour of your time. And thank you again, Shirley. It's been absolutely
Thank you.
fabulous.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.